Eric, how's it going? So a big part of what I'm doing with my Cisco work right now is working on this WebRTC work. As part of that, I'm helping co-author the document over at W3C, and on the IETF side, I'm helping co-chair the working group on this. And really, a lot of it is just sort of herding the cats, trying to bring people together to get on the same page, and then figure out how to document that and move forward. It's a lot slower and more painful than one might hope at times, but we just got out of an IETF meeting over in Paris, which was a lot of fun, and got a fair amount of stuff done there, so I can give you a bit of update of how that went and where I see us overall. You know, probably the most interesting session for me in many ways in the Paris thing was a demo session where a bunch of the browser vendors, various people that had been doing stuff on it, just showed up and showed the type of things they could do. Right? So we were seeing both in Chrome and Firefox, we were seeing a fair amount of implementation of this stuff, of video calls between them, of just interesting different things. Not the basic straight up sort of video call like you and I are having today that we're used to, but people doing things like building games. I mean, Justin and Bertie from Google, you know, he demoed a game there where you have like little magic squares where you're trying to slide them around and shuffle them and you know, figure out the puzzle. But the actual square and picture that you were trying to do was a video image of the other side. And you might think, okay, that's a pretty boring game and a pretty boring demo. But you know, if the other person moved their head around real fast on the other side, it sure made it a lot harder to figure out how the squares matched up and where they go. You kept getting confused and stuff. So what I liked about it was, not that I think that that's going to be the killer app that causes this all to take off, but I think that it shows how this is going to be embedded into other applications, how we're going to be able to put video in places that we just couldn't put it before. The Cisco guys were showing some video embedded on a TV screen in a virtual 3D world with WebGL, and you know, you're spinning it around using it, sort of Second Life style. Which again, not inherently fascinating by itself, but I think it really opens up the possibilities of trying to think about all this UC communications as just being an interesting technology that gets embedded into all kinds of other applications instead of being an application by itself.
Right. I mean, people are not really used to this, right? I mean, there is the ability to do web conferencing and stuff via browsers today, but I mean, it becomes inherently a large headache for a lot of users to be able to do this via Flash today, right?
Yeah, and you know, there's always the issues with the plugins and whether the person has it installed, and you know, it might work the first time you used it, but then you go to use it a second time, and a user doesn't have it, and it doesn't work. I mean, all of this is just about making it, you know, high success rate for lots of users, and being able to be really easy for people who aren't, you know, how many years have you and I been working in developing all of this voice over IP stuff? And it's a long time, and it's complicated. And how can we make it simple so that somebody who just ignores all of this stuff, but they just want video to work between their interesting game, between the various players. How can they make it happen? Somebody who's putting together a collaboration app, you know, some web page that allows people to vote on things or something. How can they just instantly enable that so that voice and video are part of that application? So I think that's where I really see this stuff going.
So where did our WebRTC come from, and RTCWEB and the IETF? What drove that initiative, and who are some of the players that were involved that pushed that forward? I mean, I think I understand the reason why, but that reason why has been withstanding for, you know, a number of years. Why now? And maybe give us some context in terms of how it came to be.
That's a good question, and I think that there's sometimes technology just hits the right point in time. It's gotten simple enough and enough people want it, and you can see how it would fit together. But we were all looking at how, you know, all the major players in the industry were looking at how to make it easier to build more applications. And people talked about a post-standardization type world where you could build applications and deploy them quickly on a web server. You can just push out a new version, and instantly everyone's got a new version without defining a bunch of standards. And it's not that it really changes that you need standards. It changes the type of standards you need. So we're trying to figure out APIs into browsers and things like that are standardized versus some of the more traditional protocol standardization type work. So how it splits up between IETF and W3C is IETF is dealing with the over-the-wire of the protocols, selecting which profiles of various existing protocols would be used, figuring out how they get combined, figuring out of all the many standards that the IETF's produced over the years, which ones to bundle together to help make this solution, and the type of things that need to be controllable in the solution. Then the W3C is defining the API and the browsers that the browsers can actually implement to be able to control those protocols underneath. Then the real work comes of the browser vendors need to go implement those protocols and implement the controls and ways that you can use them. And we're already seeing that in the browsers. Again, it's sort of early code, you know, it's a long ways from all final stuff, but it's starting to be there. And then you need app developers that can build the applications and the JavaScript and the HTML on top of that. And we're just starting to see the inkling of those people starting to be able to get involved and start building interesting apps on top of it. It's not quite ready for that yet, but that's starting to happen. And it's not that these are all real waterfall. It's not like, you know, with masterful insight of every application that'll ever be built, the standards guys managed to get the standards right. No, not at all, right? They propose something and sort of mess it up, and then we implement it and see what it's like to implement. And some people build some stuff on top of it, which might work, might not work, and we iterate and feedback. It's a pretty agile process when you get right down to it.
Right. So where are we in terms of some of the elements that you're currently working through in the IETFs and the W3C in regards to WebRTC? So there's video codecs, there's audio codecs, there's signaling protocols, there's security, there's identity, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be resolved to make this work. Can you give us, I don't think we can go into a deep dive because I think that would take weeks to discuss, and that's what you guys are doing in the standards bodies. But maybe give us, an overview in terms of where we are in the process.
In the traditional world where you're doing downloading YouTube videos and playing them on your browser, if the browsers couldn't agree on the codec, if some browsers did one codec and some browsers did another codec, and to be clear here, H.264 and VP8 are the main contenders that we're talking about. Well, the website could produce content in both of those formats and everyone would be happy. It was pain for the website, but it was at least workable. But when we're talking about, you've got a browser and you're trying to talk to me on my browser, we've got to have a common codec or it just isn't going to work. So it's even more critical here than it's been in any of the other deployments we've had of browser technology. So
that seems to be a good thing, right? It pushes us all to use a like technology instead of all of these disparate technologies. So that seems to be a positive to me.
Yeah, I agree. It really it ups the bar of the importance of this, and everybody, all the vendors recognize the just overall importance of coming up with something common there. So you're trying to trade that off against what type of things are easy to do in software, what types of things you have hardware support for, what the impact on battery life would be, how this interacts with existing systems. And of course, everyone has different ways that they might weigh these trade-offs. Some people might not care about non-mobile devices. Some people might only care about mobile devices. And so there's a lot to work through. So I'm hoping that sort of by the upcoming IETF in Vancouver or the one after that we can get down to some pretty good progress on this. I think that we're starting to move forward. And one is also, of course, complicated by it's not just technical issues about the codecs. Both these codecs are technically fairly similar in their quality, but it's also the monetary issues of licensing and the religious issues, to be completely frank. Lots of people, they're really striving for a much more open web that anyone can create content in and stuff, and they're trying to move away from technologies that have a lot of relative varying issues with them.
Right. So, and you're referring to the MPEG-LA in relation to H.264 and the openness of VP8, I suspect.
Yeah, and one of the issues on that is with VP8 has an issue that any new codec has, and that is that we don't really know what the royalty licensing status of it is. There's a bunch of people who claim they have IPR on it. There's a bunch of people who think that that's probably going to turn out to be bogus, and only time will help that resolve. So You know, and that's not something about VP8. That's an issue that pretty much every new codec has always had. I mean, there's uncertainty. You just don't know what's out there. Something that's been around for a while and has a concrete licensing on it, lots of people are shipping it. After lots of people have been shipping it for a while, you still don't ever guaranteed know, but you start to have a better guess that there's probably is or probably isn't IPR on something.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get a release of indemnity from any vendor who builds a codec simply because he can't guarantee that there isn't somebody else out there, you know, lying await under the bridge. So
yeah, you don't know what you don't know. That's the problem. So so moving up from that, audio codecs are an issue. We're making progress there. A lot of decisions need to be made that haven't been talked about a lot, about the details of how RTP and SDP get used, which sort of options we are. But now you're moving from the big meta issues into the small details, and they're pretty separable and easy to sort out. So there's a lot of little details that will probably be starting to move into that type of work going forward. In the signaling, we've got a pretty good picture of, I think, where we're going with that with this JSOC proposal. There's still, you know, ongoing discussions about what the form of the API is, but I think we'll see a lot of progress on that over the next few months.
So there were at one point two protocols. There's Jessup and Rope, the one that you authored, and now you and Justin Birdie from Google have combined forces and are now working together on Jessup. Is that the status of things now?
Yeah, so and it's you know, these often get, you know, pitched as Google's, Cullen's and Justin's proposal, or Cisco's and Google's or something, which is always sort of funny because the Rope proposal I co-authored with Justin, and the JSOC proposal I am now co-authoring with Justin. I wasn't at first, but so Justin and I both have always been on the same goal of like, hey, let's get something that works here and is good and figure out how to do it. We've got some different proposals. And when we talked to the whole working group about these different ways we could go, is clearly, you know, preferred the sort of JSOC proposal. So we've got a pretty good draft going on that right now, which Justin and I both like. We think that it meets the needs of what people need to do. It's been adopted by the working group. It's moving forward. And now what we're doing is we're taking that proposal that was there and figuring out the details of how that API reflects into the W3C documents. So I have a proposal for how to do that that more or less is Justin's and my proposal. And over at W3C, some Adam from Ericsson has some ideas, a different sort of proposal. And it's not like Justin and I are, you know, it's this fight between Adam and me or something like this. Like we're all just trying to look at what's good about these ideas and figure out how to bring some commonality to them and bring them together. And that's going really well because everyone has fairly similar goals of what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to make this easy for users to use. They're trying to make sure that it can implement the functionality that's needed for all the use cases that people have brought up. So that's just straightforward technical work. You know, there's not a it doesn't change anyone's finances. It doesn't change any religious issues. This is the type of work that engineers at standards bodies know how to drive forward well. So that I think will make good progress on.
How important? I want to get a little bit technical for just a minute here in relation to Jessup. What were the main differences between Rope and Jessup, and what are the fundamental components of Jessup that make it the chosen one, so to speak? I think that there was that some of the key elements of it were from a point of view of browser control. They wanted to. The Jessup tries to move a lot of the functionality out of in the browser and put it in the hands of the JavaScript. So, for example, once the browser can create an offer that sort of expresses what its capabilities are and what it might be able to do, but the JavaScript can modify that and change it and has a chance of changing it before the browser actually selects what it's going to offer and then gets sent to the other side. So that was one of the sort of fundamentals of JSOP that I think a lot of people liked was give the application as much control as possible, as I think how I would loosely state it, and try and move as much state as possible out of the browser and into the JavaScript application running inside of the browser. Now, on the other hand, one of the fundamental principles behind Rope
that I know I liked and a lot of people, was important to a lot of people, was we want to keep this compatible with the SIP offer answer model. So we want to make sure that it's pretty easy to gateway this back to a SIP world and to all of our existing systems that we've built. Because that's an important set of stuff to work. If we can leverage off the hundreds of millions of deployed endpoints or billions of endpoints that are already out there, it makes any new communication feature more compelling, right? I don't want to be in the case where it's like, the first guy to buy a fax machine was a brave man, right? It's not clear who that other fax was going to. So trying to leverage as much of the legacy equipment as possible, but still make a nice clean future. So that's I think the current form of Jessup brings a lot of those together. It brings a lot of the application level control, but allowing use of a SIP, or an SDP offer answer model that's easily gatewayable to SIP. So that's what I view as the real fundamental technical aspects of those proposals and how they've evolved.
So from a bit of a higher level perspective, we have WebRTC and the W3C, and then we have RTCWEB and the IETF. Who's working on what? I mean, is it all one group, and they're just, what's the situation? What's the dealio there?
It's totally confusing at times, and part of what confuses it is we'll be in one of the meetings, and someone will say, well, really that decision should be made in the other meeting, and it comes down to, well, I've seen the people in the other meeting, and they're us, right? It's largely the same people working in both meetings, which is helping keep it coordinated. But at a sort of level of the roles and responsibilities, the RTCWEB, and I got to tell you, in retrospect, I was one of the people who I think helped propose these names, RTCWEB and WebRTC. It's so confusing. I get myself confused. I don't know how anyone else keeps it straight. But RTCWEB, because real-time communications is sort of more of the IETF's thing, they have the RTC part first. And W3C, because their web's sort of more their thing, they have the web first. So that's how to keep the two straight. RTCWEB is really, they're focusing on a lot of how these protocols are being used. So and then the W3C is focusing on the APIs in the browser to access them. So it often gets hard. It's like, well, these aren't completely independent decisions. I mean, you might want to change how the protocols are working to make the APIs work better, or to give the applications more control, or vice versa. So they're very tightly interlaced, a lot of the decisions. Security drives that more than anything. I mean, W3C has a large focus on privacy in particular as one of the key components of security. IETF also has a privacy focus, but has a lot of other security concerns about, certainly encryption and confidentiality, integrity of this media. So, some of the things like that get real complicated very quickly across both groups. And security it's not surprising that security is one of the most complicated topics, and much of the real-time communications work we've done over the years, security, well, on many protocols, security is often one of the hard parts.
So it sounds like the media and the signaling of that media are done more in the IETF, and the web-centric components that relate to the browsers, etc., are done more in the W3C. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good summary of it.
Okay. How long do you think it's going to be before we actually see a product deployed using this technology in a production environment? I mean, is it going to be weeks? Is it going to be days? Is it going to be months? I mean, I know that you don't have the almighty crystal ball in front of you, but if you had, if you were charting a roadmap for a corporation, for instance, what would you foresee being, the end game?
I mean, all of these future predictions are never worth the paper they're written on, and this one's written on digital bits, not even paper. So, let's keep it all in perspective. But given that, we're seeing this roll out in browsers under protected flags, meaning the user has to go and set a special flag to be able to enable this functionality today. But that's the first steps of getting it really very much real in the browsers. I'd certainly guess in the second half of this year that we'd be seeing the production versions of browsers, of some browsers being able to enable at least some subset of this technology and enough to do basic voice and video. And I would guess that as that happens, we'll start to see some applications take advantage of that. Some of them initially will probably be very toy sort of applications. Some of them will be much more interesting. And, you know, there's a couple obvious high runner applications that will come out sooner or later that will be interesting to me. I mean, at some point, I would guess that Google Hangouts would switch to supporting this type of technology. You know, a product like WebEx would benefit in many ways from this type of technology. When those types of things roll out, it's much harder to guess because you're asking a question not only about when will the technology be really ready and fully baked in the browsers, but you're also asking a question about how long before that version of the browser is deployed by a significantly large percentage of the overall web population that it starts to be really interesting. So my caution to people on this stuff is actually the bad news is it's going to take much longer than everyone wishes or anyone thinks, because even after it works in the browsers, the standards will take longer, the standards will change a little bit, the browsers will adapt to the standards, and then we have, right now, 2 of the browsers are very prominently working on this and showing examples. Some of the other browsers, we really don't know what their roadmaps or schedules are. I mean, all the browser vendors are following this work and watching it and seeing what's going on. But exactly what their plans are less obvious than Firefox and Chrome, where you can go look at the code. It's all out there, right? So we'll see what happens, see how it all rolls out. But second half of this year, I'm expecting to, see this in production browsers and be able to go play with it.
Cool. So you're
I'm not
like
expecting all the standards to be done by the second half, by that point in time.
And you're going to make sure that happens, right?
Well, standards are a slow and painful process.
Yeah. So
I think there'll be enough nailed down in the standards that browsers can fairly comfortably go and implement things and know that some of it will change, but not so much of it.
It seems to me, that Google's kind of driving a lot of the decisions there from a web perspective. They've made it pretty clear that Chrome will support VP8 and ISAC and some of the open source stuff that they revealed not long ago, and Jessup as the primary signaling protocol. So it seems like there will be flavors of WebRTC that you'll see flow out, and then you'll see a more a collective come together. It's interesting to note that, and I don't want to speculate, but it's interesting to note that there's been little or no interaction on behalf of Microsoft on this topic, considering they just scooped up Skype for $8 billion. It'd be interesting to see them, come into these discussions. But I've been following the discussions through the mail list, etc., and I'm not seeing a whole lot of interaction on their behalf.
I mean, I think in fairness, they all are following it. I mean, Bernard Ababa from Microsoft, before even the Skype acquisition, has certainly, spent a lot of time and energy and making sure that that's going in a direction he's comfortable with. So he's certainly, some involvement there. And the guys that used to be at Skype and are now at Microsoft, from Jonathan Rosenberg through Kaufman.
I remember Rosenberg making some very valid points at IETF 80 during the plenary regarding, SIP getting thrown directly under the bus. That seemed to be a pretty evident message. So I'm just, it's interesting to see what's going on there. I hope they get on board. Not sure if it matters in the long run, but I hope they do something interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great fun if I could go to any browser in the world and just open it up, and there were all my Skype contacts, and I could go make Skype phone calls on that. That seems like great benefit to the users of the world.
Absolutely.
Whether they would do something like that, whether they made business sense for them, I got no opinion on. I mean, who knows? But,
of course not.
I think what I was trying to say is, the Microsoft guys, are following this closely, are contributing to it. They've been thinking a lot about how the ICE and parts of it will work and various arguments into it. So I think that there's, I think that where the current direction reflects certainly Google's driving force behind it. Microsoft's definitely involved. The Mozilla guys are a super driving force behind it. Particularly, I think a lot of the security stuff. I think Mozilla is going to come forward with really some of the best proposals in that space.
What about Safari and WebKit and mobile? Where do you think this will end up in the mobile space? Obviously, Google is the almighty hand behind Android, so I think that should be pretty obvious. But what about Apple and Safari? Any idea in terms of where they sit in all this?
You got to realize that a lot of the stuff that's being done in Chrome is being checked into WebKit for this work.
Wow.
So it's somewhat the Apple people have to coordinate with what goes in WebKit as well. So it's not like everything being done here is automatically just drifted into Safari. It's far from the case. But Apple is already having to think and decide and consider how they think about this from a point of view of what's going into WebKit. And obviously, patches have been landing into WebKit. Things have been moving along. Apple traditionally doesn't announce their plans before they go and do them, right? So when and if and how Apple comes out with something in any given piece of technology, I'd be shocked to hear anything before it actually happens. But this is a space that, clearly they'd be following. What their opinion of it is or anything, who knows?
Yeah, sure.
We won't know that until it happens.
Yeah, sure, but it's
on stage, right?
Yeah.
WWDC, we'll find out.
So you know what? I think that it'd be naive of us to think that they aren't watching this very closely, and it'd be wonderful one day if you woke up and found an iPhone 5 in your hand that actually enabled this technology natively. Within their resident applications. I mean, it doesn't seem to me that that's at all far-fetched, but that's just pure speculation on my behalf.
No, it's very true. I mean, I'd love to see that. It seems certainly something that, they must be thinking about what they would do. Who knows? But it seems logical to think about it. I'd equally love to see an Android phone with this. I mean, so far a lot of the focus has not actually been on the aspects that impact mobile in these environments. It's somewhat different, even though both Chrome and Android come from the same company. I worked for a company where just because two things come from Cisco doesn't mean they were super well coordinated, right? And big companies are big companies.
Yeah.
So, love to see that. I'd love to see this type of stuff work in Boot to Gecko as well. There's a whole bunch of different platforms that are coming together here that this could take a big step forward and change how those platforms are used in many ways.
Yeah, good point. When do you think the developers are going to be able to really take advantage of this? When will we see, the standards move along far enough and the APIs move along far enough so that not just the people that are very close to the core of the standards bodies and the larger companies that are driving this forward, but just the average JavaScript developer can take advantage of this and make use of it? When do you think we'll be at a stage where that'll happen?
Again, I mean, it's total crystal ball gazing, but I think I'd put it somewhere in the sort of closer to the end of this year, that developers who sort of like to live on the bleeding edge a little bit can go read the specs and look at some demo code and really put together interesting things.
Cool.
And I think it'll be a bit later till, the people who want to wait for the O'Reilly book to come out before they start ever trying something, before they're going to get to go there. And, there's a range, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obvious. There's been some great demos thus far, as you mentioned earlier. And
brings up an interesting point. You should write the O'Reilly book on this. Go on, you got lots of spare time.
WebRTC,
You're just doing a startup company right now. Don't tell me you don't have spare time.
Yeah, WebRTC for dummies. If we look at this from a interop perspective, what does this mean to SIP, and what does this mean to other, like for instance Skype, just as an example? So I have Skype has a proprietary protocol that no one's ever seen, and SIP is a very open protocol that a lot of people use and have deployed. How is WebRTC going to work with these two different paradigms?
Right. So, I mean, the questions, lots of proprietary protocols have been designed to be mappable to SIP so that they can work in various ways. So, I know Skype terminates to SIP PSTN gateways in some cases. It's at some level mappable. Cisco's originally proprietary phone protocols, we've moved to SIP and mapped to SIP. I mean, this is across the board. You try and map to the standards-based things. So it's important that this be mappable as well. And we'll believe that if this is mappable to SIP and SIP's mappable to something else, that there's going to be sort of this transitive property that people will be able to build devices to do. So let's start talking about the limitations of this mappability. We'd really like the media traffic to be able to go directly between the two without having to be gatewayed or something. I mean, that's a large part of WebRTC's decision to go with exactly the same media protocols that are used in all the existing stuff today, things like RTP, SRTP. But some of the problems, like some of the security problems we had of making sure that you had consent to actually send media to the far end, we need to look at using ICE for that. So lots of devices support ICE today, lots of SIP legacy equipment supports ICE today, but lots doesn't as well. So we sort of start figuring out how to make the trade-offs. How can we make it so it's pretty easy to gateway this and it works with lots of things, but what do you lose? You can't keep the whole past. And it becomes this complicated trade-off. So where I see this trade-off roughly landing right now is that it will work with, if somebody wants to build a device that translates between things, that processes all the media, of course you can always translate between anything. That's always easy to do.
That's a good point. Sorry to interject. Please keep that thought. But before I forget, because I'm probably have a shorter memory than you do. Acme Packet, like one of the biggest session border controller vendors out there, are they participating in the WebRTC discussions as well?
Yeah, they definitely are, and Hadriel has been very, Hadriel Kaplan from Acme has been very involved with a lot of this stuff. He's a real smart guy on this stuff. So I think that what they do will actually have a significant impact on how well this works for everyone and what to do, because there's a lot of their equipment deployed, widely used. It'll be interesting to see.
It'd be interesting to see a WebRTC to SIP element in their session border controllers. That'd be really interesting.
That would really enable a lot of things for a lot of people, right? So whether they'd go do something like that, I don't know, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Sure. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it goes exactly to the point. If you're going to do something like that, like someone like Acme Packet that could gateway the media, could easily make anything work.
Right.
Now, it would be cheaper and take less CPU if they made it simpler, if there was less that they needed to do, if they didn't need to re-encrypt media, for example. So we've been talking about some extensions, a proposal called EKT that would allow an SBC or a gateway device to not do that. There's questions around whether the other endpoint needs to support ICE and ways of simplifying that. Some of the guys at Microsoft have been working on ideas to simplify the amount of support that was needed for that. And the signaling is not a real big deal because it's not high volume traffic. Yeah, there'll probably need to have signaling gateways that move between these things. But my goal is to try and minimize the amount that we need to do with the media, or at least be able to deploy it in a way where you can have fairly decent media interoperability between sort of modern SIP devices and this type of environment.
So what about the peer-to-peer players? I mean, the guys that don't have a centralized, server, and they have a proprietary protocol and they don't want to transcode to SIP, just to beat a dead horse a little bit. How do you see them working with WebRTC? Would that be a direct gateway that they create in their own network to participate with the rest of the federated WebRTC offers?
That might be one way for them to do it, was a gateway type approach to that. Another possibility would be to actually, depending on what the proprietary protocols were, to actually implement those in the browser and just run them in JavaScript and go do it. So I mean, you'll know in the P2P SIP working group, I have a bit of fascination with that whole space, spent some time on that. We've been playing around a little bit with the idea, could we implement P2P SIP or something almost exactly like it in the browser and using the data channel that's being defined as WebRTC as the way to communicate between all the nodes. So could we have thousands of browsers or millions of browsers around the world all participating in a DHT, a distributed hash table, sharing this state in a peer-to-peer type way where the browsers were just talking to other browsers. There's no web servers even really involved other than to download the initial program. And everything we've seen so far is the answer to that's yes, you can do that type of thing. So it'll change for each peer-to-peer application, but it'll be interesting to see the type of things that we get 7 years down the road after we've got the basics of this, where this all leads. I think it's going to open up possibilities quite beyond anything we sort of are imagining now. And some of those possibilities are going to really shake up existing people's business models. And that's always upsetting when that happens, but it's also, there's a lot of opportunity when that happens.
Well, generally innovation creates disruption, right? It's rather inevitable, it seems. So,
Yeah, and anybody who's working in this space right now, whether it's, companies like Cisco and Ericsson are very involved with this work, obviously Skype, Microsoft are involved at some sort of level, or the browser vendors involved at some level. And this is going to disrupt and change lots of things for us in many ways.
So how do you think this is going to impact the enterprise? I mean, how do you think this is going to play a role in enterprise communications? Because traditionally they are one of the last segments to move into new and innovative technology, and we're seeing a lot of consumerization of IT,
right.
and that certainly is playing a role in their decision making. But I mean, how do you foresee WebRTC playing a role in the enterprise?
I live and breathe so much in the enterprise space. I occasionally think that I can't see the forest for the trees, but let's hit a bunch of trends that are really happening in enterprise today. This bring your own device and the consumerization of it is just, that's a huge impact and a huge change in the way people think about it. So I think that this is going to play into exactly that. This makes it easier for you to have a secure communications that's running inside of your enterprise on a device that you brought yourself. Maybe it's an iPad that doesn't have anything except a browser in it. Who knows what it is, right? So I think it makes it easier for IT to roll out applications onto devices that they don't control. I don't think they've fully got their head around that yet. What that means, how it'll impact them is a big change. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is it makes it much easier for them to reach out to people outside the enterprise. So the traditional enterprise application has generally worked, sort of okay inside of the enterprise. If you're a remote worker, good luck with that, but they might be able to get it to work if you can sort of convince the network to sort of pretend that you're not actually inside the enterprise when actually you're outside of it. And if you're really outside of it, like you're a customer or you're a partner or you're one of the vendors or you're somebody at another company, and it just doesn't work, right? And I think that that's where this really has a lot of potential, is to make it enterprise applications work for people outside the enterprise. I mean, enterprise web servers all work great serving up web pages to people outside the enterprise. IT knows how to deal with that.
How do you think they're going to handle identity assertion? So we don't, suffer man-in-the-middle attacks and, interesting things like that. I mean, it seems to me that might be one of the harder parts to resolve. And I know that...
You're definitely right. And, it's like, look, I've been working on this problem for how many years? I mean, I think you and I talked many years ago about a slide where I was, don't take candy from strangers. And I still feel this way, okay? Everyone tells me they want encrypted traffic. That's great. I want encrypted traffic too. But if I don't know who my traffic is encrypted to,
right,
I have no idea whether it's good or bad. I mean, I'm just taking candy from strangers here. It's taking encrypted traffic from people you don't know who it's encrypted to. So we need to move so not only do I know my traffic's encrypted, that's great, but I got to know whether it's encrypted to the person I think I'm talking to or whether it's encrypted to the attacker in the middle. So we need identity. And we need the identity bound to the media. And there's some proposals floating around for this. Now, we've never had a really great identity system in the internet as a whole. I think that we're starting to see a better approach to this. People are using Facebook Connect, as lots of people use it, or they're using LinkedIn type logins as a way to run their identity. It's a great one for business users.
Do you see?
Maybe it's Google Login, right?
Yeah. So do you see some of these guys becoming identity providers in this scenario, where they can verify, much like VeriSign provides a certificate for an SSL-driven e-com site? Do you see these guys providing an identity assertion that is verified to solve some of these problems?
Well, I'm hoping so. So Mozilla is working on a technology called Browser ID to provide identity in many ways very similar to the type of stuff we might get with OpenID or OAuth. From my point of view, where it differs a lot is to use Facebook Connect or an OAuth-based solution like that, I give away a lot of privacy information for the convenience of using that.
Well, and not only that, it seems to me that you're only taking the data that they give you, and they haven't really done any validation on their side. So I may have the same name as Eric Lagerway in Facebook, but I'm not the same guy. And so there could be, I see that as a smaller problem, but sorry to interrupt again.
Yeah, but so all of these systems have to be done. So Eric Riscola has what's definitely the leading contender for a solution to this in the working group right now. It's some work called identity proxy. And roughly speaking, how identity proxy works is in the browser where you're making a phone call. Let's say you and I have an application, it's running on PokerStar, but we want to use identities to log in from LinkedIn. We need to be able to go off and run some separate JavaScript. So in one context of the browser, you're running the phone call. In another security context, you're running the identity proxy where you communicate with whoever your identity provider is, LinkedIn in this case, and say, hey, I want to make a phone call. Sign this assertion for me. Form up some sort of token or way of validating that this really is me and give it back to me. If that gets past the phone call, it's sent to the other side. The other side of the person you're phoning can go and validate that that assertion was really valid. It can go and talk to LinkedIn. Now, the cleverness of Eric's design is that it abstracts away who your identity provider is. So you can choose your identity providers, and different ones can run by just running a different piece of JavaScript in the browser. So I think he's looking at it from a sort of OAuth point of view for Facebook, from an OpenID point of view from Google Login, and from a browser ID point of view from the Mozilla system. So, do we have a fully baked, we know all the answers for this? Yet? No. But it looks really promising, and it's going to solve a problem that we never managed to solve in SIP. We never really managed to, we had lots of attempts at various identity technologies from S-MINE, and we had PGP in 2543, we had S-MINE in 3261, we had my certs work to try and make it easy to get certificates to make S-MINE work, we have the 4474 identity work. I mean, none of this stuff has really taken off in any meaningful way. So, that's a problem that basically failed in my mind to be solved in that world. But I think here, we've got a better attempt at solving it than we've ever had before, and largely it has to do with the rollout of large identity services already existing on the internet that are becoming common, like LinkedIn.
Right. So it stands to reason then that the initial players that will be rolling this technology to the masses, if we look at the landscape, we can see that Google has a great number of users in Plus and in Google Plus, and they have Hangouts available in Google Plus. We'll probably see this technology roll through to that platform, probably before a lot of other players get their hands on it, simply because they can manage their own identities. Does that kind of make sense?
That might make sense, that there could be some of that, and don't forget one of the largest groups of identities out there for real-time communications would be the Skype user database.
Yeah,
right?
well, very valid point.
One. Who knows what sort of services will be offered there? So I think anyone that has look, there's one thing that's really clear. Users don't want 1 million logins. Right?
No.
We've seen that on the web. It's impossible to manage. We want a few.
Yep.
Who the few will be, who knows? But whatever those few are, we need to figure out how to leverage those into this communication thing and use them to bind to the media so that I know who I'm talking to and there's no taking candies from strangers.
Yeah,
so,
I like it.
There? Yeah, a few details along the way still need to be worked out. But I think that this approach that Eric's been working on and some of the prototypes and demos he's done is really showing that it's possible to have a solution in this space.
Yeah, great respect for what Eric Escorla is doing in the standards body. It's good to see that he's pushing for this kind of social, ID assertion methodology as opposed to, the old ways of doing things, which seems to be going by the wayside now in rather, quick form.
It's probably an important meta issue in this whole space is we've got a lot of people who worked in the SIP space for a long time, and there's a lot of our babies floating around of things we loved or spent a lot of time or energy on, and we've just got to be, ruthless here about deciding what were the good things that we need to preserve and what were the things that just didn't turn out. They might have been good ideas at the time, but didn't happen, and we need to throw them under the bus.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think that's one of the reasons why, we decided to kind of move away from SIP as the underlying protocol, because we felt that there was just so much innovation that needed to happen that to use that protocol, it would have been difficult to do that.
Sure. So that's, I think in you guys in thinking about how to invent a new peer-to-peer protocol and make something very flexible that works, you're leading the way there. This application where I just logged on using my LinkedIn logon, it's talking to exactly where I think the WebRTC stuff should go. I think it should, follow the direction of applications like this. They're easy to use. Users like using them. That's the right space to go.
Yeah, agreed. Is there anything else that we've kind of missed out on and that you want to touch on before we sign off?
Well, I think really what I'd like to do is just, invite people to sort of figure out how to track this and where the right point in time is where they can start building applications on it, and seriously think about how this might change all the things you're doing. Even if you think you build an application that has nothing to do with communications, ask yourself, geez, if it cost me nothing just to embed voice and video communications in certain points of that, or to allow video for certain things, even if it wasn't video people, maybe it's video of something totally different, how would that change what you're building and where you're going? This is one of the biggest changes I see to the whole web environment that's happening in the world today. And I think that people need to think about how it impacts them and then start playing with it.
Right. Challenge them to rise to the occasion, as it were.
Show up, pay attention, see what's going on, and not be, run over by the bus that's coming down the road.
That's awesome. All right, Cullen, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Cullen Jennings, the chair for the working group in the IETF's RTCWEB, and active in the WebRTC working group and the W3C fellow at Cisco. Thanks very much for giving me some time today, Cullen. Appreciate it.
Pleasure as always, Eric. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.